Have you ever found yourself wondering what actually happens to a patent application after you hit submit? It's not just some black box. It's really a journey, right? With lots of twists and turns, and each stage has its own label, its own status. Today, we're going to try and pull back the curtain on that whole process for you. Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is our ongoing audio series digging into the Manual of Patent Examining Procedure, the MPEP. Think of it like your audio guide, section by section. We're currently working through MPEP Chapter 200. That's the one covering types and status of application, benefit, and priority claims. And for this deep dive, we're zeroing in on MPP Section 203, Status of Applications. This part is really fundamental if you want to grasp how the USPTO, the Patent Office, classifies where your application actually is in the whole procedure. So our mission today, let's extract the key takeaways, give you a clear, kind of concise understanding of that patent application lifecycle. Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's more than just, knowing the definitions, understanding these statuses, like having a GPS for your application. It tells you where you are, what might be coming next, and crucially, what you should maybe be thinking about doing strategically. It's like the application story unfolding.
That's a great way to put it. It's unfolding story. Okay, so let's kick things off right at the beginning.
Yep.
Chapter 1 of the story, maybe. The new status. What does that actually mean? What's going on behind the scenes then?
Right. So a new application, specifically it's a non-provisional filing, just to be clear. That's the full formal application, not a provisional one. And it's one that hasn't yet received an examiner's first action. That's the key. It's that initial phase right after you've filed, everything's in, it's officially with the office, but the real examination, the substantive part, hasn't kicked off yet. It's basically sitting in the queue.
Okay, so it's like the calm before the storm. Or maybe the strategic calm, perhaps. And there's a really important detail here, isn't there? For the applicant, I mean. This new status doesn't change even if you file preliminary amendments. What's the thinking there? Why might you do that before the examiner even looks at it?
That's a really sharp point. And yeah, it's a strategic window that I think sometimes gets overlooked. While the application is still tagged as new, you've actually got this chance to refine your claims, the specification, without the pressure of, immediately needing to respond to a rejection. It lets you proactively maybe strengthen the application, clear up potential ambiguities, maybe even add some support for amendments you think you might need later. And you do all this before the examiner forms their first impression. It can really help streamline things later, maybe cut down on the number of office actions you get.
So it's about setting the stage as best you can before the curtain even rises. Could save a lot of back and forth later on. But, okay, not every application just sails through from new to granted, right? That's probably rare. What happens when the examiner does take a look and says, hold on a minute? That takes us to the rejected status, I guess. What's the real takeaway here for an applicant beyond just the sort of initial shock of hearing rejected?
Right, and that shock is real. A lot of applicants, their first instinct is to see rejected as like failure, game over. But that's a really critical misunderstanding. A rejected application is simply one where an examiner has issued an action detailing some statutory issues, novelty, obviousness, whatever it is, and that action hasn't been answered yet within the reply timeframe. The real insight, I think, is that a rejection isn't failure. It's actually the USPTO handing you a map. It tells you precisely what they think the issues are. So smart applicants see it as, an invitation for dialogue, a chance to figure out the examiner's concerns and then, strategically respond.
Okay, so it's a dynamic thing, not a final word. Less, no, more, not yet. Convince me. What's a common slip-up you see applicants make when they first get that rejected status?
Oh, a very common one is taking it personally. Maybe getting defensive in the response. Instead of just digging in their heels and saying, no, I was right the first time, the most effective thing is usually to engage directly with what the examiner said. Really analyze why it was rejected, look hard at the prior art they cited, and then craft a response that either, amends the claims to get around the issues, or presents really solid arguments why the examiner's wrong, or often it's a bit of both. Remember that rejected status sticks until you reply. Or if you don't reply in time, that's when it goes abandoned. It's all about that negotiation.
That tees up the next status perfectly. Amended. Examiner says something, applicant thinks, applicant acts. So what does it mean for an application to be officially amended? What kind of actions can that response include?
Right. Amended means exactly that the applicant has filed a formal reply to the examiner's action. And this reply isn't just a quick note, it's a strategic document. It can involve, several things. Most commonly, yeah, you'll see amendments to the actual claims, maybe narrowing them down a bit or clarifying features to overcome the rejection. But it can also include what are called traversals. Those are basically detailed arguments pushing back against the examiner's reasoning, explaining why you think they're incorrect on the law or the facts. Or sometimes, if the examiner issued a restriction requirement, that's when they think you've got multiple inventions in one application. The applicant might make an election, choosing one invention to focus on for now.
That's a key point, the different types of responses. It really underlines how iterative this whole patent prosecution thing is. You're not just like throwing documents over the wall, you're actively debating and refining to protect the invention. Is there a kind of artistry involved in writing a really good amendment or traversal?
Oh, definitely. I'd say artistry is a good word. It's about being precise and persuasive. You're trying to find that sweet spot, right? Where you overcome the examiner's specific objections without giving up more claim scope than you absolutely have to. A skilled practitioner might, say, tweak just a few words in a claim to clearly distinguish it from the prior art. For traversals, it's about building a really solid legal argument, maybe citing relevant case law or explaining the technical differences super clearly. It really is a negotiation, and every word matters in shaping what eventually gets granted. This is where deep knowledge of the tech and the patent law really pays off.
Okay, so after all that careful work, that strategic back and forth, hopefully there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Which brings us to allowed or in issue. That sounds like a pretty major milestone success.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
Yeah, huge milestone. An application gets tagged as allowed or in issue once the examiner basically decides, okay, all the statutory requirements are met.
Yeah.
And then the USPTO sends out the official notice of allowance. That's the green light. It signals the office is ready to grant a patent based on your application as it stands. It's definitely a moment of significant relief for the applicant.
Fantastic news. But does allowed mean the patent is actually granted right then and there? Or are there still like final hoops to jump through?
Good question. Not quite granted yet, and yes, there are still critical steps. The allowed status stays until the application formally issues as a patent.
Yeah.
But, and this is a big but, that's dependent on the applicant paying the issue fee and any publication fees too. If you don't pay those fees within the deadline, the application can actually become abandoned. Yes, even after it's been allowed. It's that final administrative step. But if you fumble it, you could lose the patent rights you were so close to getting. So yeah, it's the second to last step, a great sign, but you still need to be vigilant.
Wow, that's a crucial heads up. Even when you think you're done, you're not quite done. And speaking of less happy endings, let's talk about the abandoned status. Nobody wants to see that, obviously, but understanding how it happens seems vital. What are the main ways an application ends up abandoned?
Yeah, it's definitely the outcome to avoid. There are a few main paths to abandonment. The simplest, I guess, is express abandonment. The applicant just formally tells the USPTO they're giving up. More common, though, is abandonment because of failure to reply to an office action within the deadline. Those reply periods are non-negotiable, really. Another common one, like we just said, is failing to pay the issue fee after allowance. That catches people out sometimes. And then there's a specific one for provisional applications. They become abandoned if more than 12 months go by and you haven't converted it to a non-provisional or claimed its benefit in a non-provisional filing. That 12-month clock is absolute for provisionals.
So it really, really boils down to being incredibly organized and keeping track of dates.
Docketing, right? Missing one deadline, whether for a reply or a fee, could just wipe out years of work. What can applicants do to try and prevent that?
Absolutely. The number one thing is a rock-solid docketing system. Could be fancy software, could be a super carefully managed spreadsheet, but you need something reliable that tracks every single deadline. It's also smart to have maybe multiple reminders, backup checks. A redundant system isn't overkill here because one mistake can be fatal to the application. And yeah, fully understanding the timing for provisionals is critical. A lot of inventors unfortunately lose their priority date because they miss that 12-month window. It just takes constant vigilance.
Okay, and even before an application gets onto any of these tracks, rejected, amended, allowed, it has to actually get started properly, which brings us to incomplete. This sounds like it stops the journey before it even begins. Exactly. An incomplete application is one that's missing something essential required for filing. For example, maybe you forgot some pages of the specification, or required drawings weren't included, or maybe the inventor declaration wasn't there. If it's missing those core parts, it's deemed incomplete. And the biggest, most immediate consequence is it does not get a filing date. That's huge, because the filing date locks in your priority. Under the first inventor to file system, that date can be everything if someone else invents the same thing around the same time.
Right, so it's not just a procedural hiccup, it's a potential loss of priority, which is legally massive. What's the big lesson then for applicants about that very first submission?
The lesson is, don't rush the initial filing just to get something in. It has to be complete and compliant according to the rules. You need to meticulously check that every required piece is there and correct. An incomplete status means your legal protection essentially hasn't started yet. Your invention is kind of exposed. It just really highlights how crucial thoroughness is right at the very beginning. You need to secure that foundational filing date.
Okay, so we've sort of charted the course, the different statuses an application can navigate. Now, the practical question for anyone listening who has an application in the system, how do you actually monitor this? How do you check the status?
Right. The main tool, the one the USPTO really wants you to use, is the USPTO Patent Center. It's their online portal. It has both public and private views. Public view lets anyone look up issued patents or published applications. Applications usually publish 18 months after filing. The private view, though, that's for applicants and their representatives. You need a customer number and proper login credentials. That lets you track your specific applications, including unpublished ones, in basically real time.
Sounds like Patent Center is the way to go, definitely preferred over, say, writing letters. Are there any neat features in Patent Center that maybe people don't always use but are really helpful?
Oh, absolutely. The USPTO strongly encourages using Patent Center because it's just so much more efficient and the information is right there. Beyond just seeing the current status, like amended or allowed, you can usually access the whole file history. Office actions, your responses, examiner interview notes, it's all typically there. That context is invaluable. A feature maybe underused is setting up email alerts. You can often get notified automatically when the status changes or a new document is added. That's a great way to stay on top of things, especially with those deadlines we keep mentioning.
That's a great practical tip, setting up alerts. Now, about making inquiries, is there a right or wrong time to ask the USPTO about status? Can you just call them up whenever? What's the general etiquette there?
Yeah, timing definitely matters, and there's an expected etiquette. For instance, if you've just filed an amendment, making a status inquiry right away isn't really appropriate. The general guidance is to wait several months after filing a response before inquiring if you haven't heard anything. You need to give the office reasonable time to process it, for the examiner to review it, and prepare the next action. Calling too soon doesn't really help, it just takes up resources. The idea is you monitor Patent Center first and only inquire if a significant amount of time seems to have passed beyond the norm.
Okay. Manage expectations, understand the workflow. Got it. And I imagine there are probably special channels for, say, very high-level government inquiries.
Yes, that's right. If an inquiry comes from, like, Congress or the White House or an embassy or another executive agency, there's a specific separate procedure for handling those. It's mainly to make sure responses are consistent and follow overall Department of Commerce policies. For the typical applicant, though, the standard channels Patent Center, contacting the examiner if appropriate later on, are the way to go. Just good to know those other procedures exist, but they don't usually affect the day-to-day for most filers.
Well, we have certainly covered a lot of ground today. From that initial new status, navigating the back and forth of rejected and amended, the excitement of allowed, and the warnings behind abandoned and incomplete. Hopefully you feel like you have a much clearer map now of these procedural states and also how to check where your application is on that map using Patent Center. Our goal, as always, was to give you that shortcut to being well-informed, cutting through the complexity with some hopefully useful insights.
And remember, if any particular status really caught your attention, the MPEP itself is the ultimate source. You can always dive deeper into those specific sections.
Absolutely. And, this whole deep dive audio series, putting together, making it flow, it really wouldn't happen without the amazing work of our creative director, Mike Shepard. He's the one coordinating everything and structuring these deep dives, making sure it all comes together. So a huge thank you to Mike for all his effort behind the scenes. Okay, before we wrap up, a final thought for you to chew on. Now that you understand these different statuses, these different stages, and the strategic points within them, how might a really savvy applicant use this knowledge not just to react to the USPTO, but to proactively steer their application, to maybe anticipate bumps in the road, and ultimately maximize their chances of getting the strongest patent possible?
Yeah, something to think about, shifting from just reacting to proactively navigating the system using this status knowledge.
Definitely. Well, that's all for this installment. Until next time on the deep dive.
And just a reminder for everyone listening, this summary of the MPEP was generated using AI tools, specifically ChatGPT and NotebookLM. It might contain errors or omissions. It's really intended for general educational and informational purposes. It is absolutely not legal advice or a replacement for proper training. For the authoritative herd, always consult the official MPEP itself, talk to a qualified instructor, or engage a registered patent practitioner.